Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm ArtTipaldi, the editor of Blues Review magazine, the largest blues magazine in the country, in the world. And we're here tonight at Don Odell's Legends with really one of the top blues guitarists, singers, songwriters in the genre for the last 2 decades, and that's Debbie Davies. Debbie, welcome tonight.
Thank you, Art. It's great to be here.
Oh, we're glad to have you. Now, let's see if my math is right. You have 2 new albums in the last maybe 3 years.
Yeah, something like that.
You have a total of 12 albums on your own, 1 live one that you came out and self-produced, and 2 that you did with a bunch of other people like Otis Grant, Tab Benoit. Is that about right?
That sounds about right.
Okay, but these last 2 are kind of different from everything I think that's preceded them, meaning that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you came out with a CD called Holden Court,
Right.
which was instrumental.
Yeah, an all-instrumental CD.
What was the thinking, the thought process behind that one?
Well, a lot of fans had mentioned it, you know, because I've always done instrumentals. I love, learning all the Freddie King instrumentals was kind of my going to school, learning to play. I've always loved that. And I love that whole era, circa 1960. Is really kind of the guitar playing, that made me want to play.
Yeah.
So I felt like if I did instrumentals, all kind of digging from that pool, and originals too,
right,
that would be like almost an homage to all those guitar players like Gatemouth Mouth Brown and Albert Collins and Albert King and,
sure,
Otis Rush, that I loved and that made me want to play guitar. So
when you were writing originals for that, did you try to write with one of those men's styles in mind, or did you write and then
honestly,
let it take you where it did?
Yeah, for instrumentals, if I've written those, when I have, it just sort of comes to me, or an idea. I'm messing around with my guitar, and I land on something. It's not a preconceived idea at all. Yeah.
And instrumentals, to me, in any genre, sound very much like jazz, where you play ahead for a while, and then you just sort of riff on that, or see where it takes you spontaneously.
Usually, there's a head, and then there's just solo section, which is just basically blues progression.
Right.
And then back to a head. It's kind of a simple way of doing it,
Right.
And when I did Blues in D natural, you kind of refer to that head again after you've played into it a few bars from, the beginning. But it's basically just, playing a lot of blues guitar. And I guess that's why I dig it.
Did you have keyboards on that? I forgot. Was Bruce Katz on that with you?
That one, no. That's like the only album that I don't have Bruce Katz on.
Okay.
So, in fact, he was like, but no, myself and the engineer pretty much were doing, I brought my band in, we cut a lot of it just live.
Yeah.
And then the engineer overlaid some organ.
Okay.
We're keeping it really simple. Really basic.
Right. So. And now this CD, After the Fall, which sounds like such an ominous title, After the Fall. Oh my God, a fall from grace. Where'd this title come from in your life, Deb?
Oh, well, it's kind of a double entendre, or maybe that's not the right word. Double meaning, because it is like metaphorically after the fall, after a low period, and coming up out of that. And I literally did also fall. Prior to that, I broke my arm. And, coming out of that, and the passing of Robin Rogers, and it was just, I had this really low year, like people do, in 2010, and it's just life, But sometimes that's the kind of stuff that propels songwriting.
Right.
So I wrote a bunch of tunes, like I wrote a tune for my arm as it was healing, I wasn't the kind of kid that broke things when I was young. I didn't, have a broken ankle or a broken arm or anything. So I didn't even have experience with it, or, would it ever heal, or, do I have to have another operation? So it was really frightening. I was really a baby.
Right.
Plus, when I suddenly realized I'm out of work, that means a lot of other people are out of work too. My band and everybody else, the manager, the agent who's depending on, So it was a heavy thing in my life, and then just you can't work and you've got. So I guess it was time to process things though, like Robin's passing, and so I like to think of it as coming out of that, and some of the songs are maybe a little deep into it, and others are happy and fun. And I'd been evicted from the place I was living, so I had to move too. So and sometimes you know, life is like that, where you just feel like everything's coming down on you, piling down on you, you know, but you get through it.
Yeah, and sometimes too, when you're in that dark place, you work yourself through it, and then there is that rebirth on the other side.
Exactly.
And so it sounds like this CD was some way for you to work through that darkness and come to the brighter rebirth on the other side.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. I noticed on this CD you had a young guy, Dave Gross, producing it. And on other CDs, you know, you've had everybody from Jim Gaines to yourself to just whole bunches of what is
Duke Robillard.
Duke Robillard, that's right.
Yeah.
So what did Dave bring to the Debbie Davies palette, if you will, on this new CD that
Well, I wanted to work with Dave because I really enjoy working with producers that are on my instrument, guitar players. I mean, there's like so much communication with that.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, you can explain what you're trying to do, and you don't have to explain too hard, because the person understands your instrument and the way you think. And Dave is just one of those young genius guys. He really is. His talent is immense. He can play a lot of instruments.
Yeah.
And as soon as he decided to produce, you know, he just got so deeply into it. He hears so much. He's got so many ideas.
Wow.
You know, he's really, really, we just talked a lot, and he was, you know, helping me arrange the tunes and focus, and then there were certain things that ideas he just had, and I was just like, well, I got to let him go with that, and we're going to do that.
Yeah.
And other things I'd be like, nope, this has to be.
Right.
But yeah, it's really fun to work with younger people sometimes. I mean, I love both, actually, because I relate, you know, the veteran players are my brethren, you know.
Sure.
But it was real fun working with Dave, and I just admire his talent so much.
Yeah. And I guess it takes a certain amount of courage to let yourself explore what he wants you to do, you know, to sort of get yourself out of the rut, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but, you know, a comfort zone.
That's what I was going to just say. Yeah, to push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Right.
I like to do that a little bit with each CD that I make, because I always learn so much in the studio and from the people I'm around and from the whole experience, because most of the time I'm playing live. Yeah. You know, I'm a road dog. So the studio experience there's a lot to learn in there.
Sure.
So I do sometimes step out of my comfort zone. And yeah, you're not always comfortable while you're doing it, but you're hoping it'll bring something else out of you.
That's true. Sometimes that little edge brings something new out of you when you're forced to, you know, I always go back to skiing analogies. When you're forced to ski down that hill that scares the heck out of you, when you're done, you've discovered something about yourself.
Or you've fallen.
Yeah, and you get up and try again.
Yeah.
When you go into to the studio for a recording, do you go in with a preconceived, I imagine you go in with a preconceived notion of what a song should sound like. Do producers often suggest a 180-degree turn on some songs?
Well, I don't think, you know, I would be working with somebody or choose somebody who had like a 180-degree concept for what I'm doing. But absolutely, Dave suggested stuff, you know, or even approaches to singing it. And that was like, you know, at first I'd be like, no, man, that's not what I do. Or, you know, just try this, just do this. Yeah. And you're like, well, okay, you know, I will. And then you hear it back and you're like, oh man, he was right. Right. So, yeah, it's not a 180 when I'm working with somebody in my, you know, sort of that's genre friendly to what I do. But they absolutely, you know, can tell you to do things you weren't thinking. Sometimes they hear a song a little bit differently. Oh yeah. And they hear you differently than you're hearing yourself. That's cool. Yeah. Oh yeah, very cool. Yeah. That's why you want to respect the person. Right. Because you are going to be, you know, taking their suggestions. So.
And to be open enough to take their suggestions, that says something about you as an artist. You know, there's probably a lot of people who are very resistant and say, nope, I'm not changing what I think. But if you don't change, you're not going to grow. you know.
Right,
When you change, then there's that growth.
There's both sides to that coin.
Sure.
Because you have to know what you do too, and what you do well. And I've been in some situations, you know, earlier on where people were pushing me to do things that were not necessarily my comfort zone, that I think now were not quite right for me. But hey, they were footing the bill, you know what I'm saying? So,
money talks.
Yeah, and you do, as you get older, you realize, okay, no, this is me, this is what I do.
Right.
Like it or lump it.
Yeah.